Many years ago, I had an argument with my mother. We had just watched How to Train Your Dragon 2. Now, my mother is a relatively easygoing, happy person, and she had no glaring issue with the film. I hated it. I remember the frustration as I tried to explain my unbridled fury, but wasn't really successful in doing so. Actually, I'm not sure what I was trying to accomplish at the time. Was I trying to convince her she was wrong? Was I trying to defeat her logically? Hopefully there was a part of me at the time that was simply wishing to be understood. This is probably one of my first memories in regard to story-related disagreements, and this sort of situation hasn't become less common for me. I find myself frequently disappointed by stories and clashing with those around me about them. It happens with all sorts of things, from the Arcane to the Stormlight Archive to Frozen. Hopefully, since the argument with my mother, I've become a little better at articulating instead of raging, and I've worked on sharing some of my thoughts in video format. But as I've prepared to lay my mind before the internet, I've thought a lot about the purpose of the critic and what makes a good one. Critics have existed in one form or another since art has existed, but the more modern term comes from someone who makes a living by reacting to the creations of others. Now, this can be a blessing and a curse to creators. I can't fully imagine what it would be like to have your creation deconstructed by a variety of people, many of whom have never placed a toe in the arena of creative expression. But a positive review by a well-known critic can give a work the publicity it needs to flourish. So, though you may hate them, you want them on your side. To a creator, I must imagine that sometimes critics appear as vultures, feasting on the failure of things that occur around them, even though that those things often have tried their very best to be something worthwhile. And it is no wonder at times that there is a sense that it is creator versus critic, and the audience lies somewhere in the middle. I've reflected on the fictitious words of Ego from Ratatouille when he describes his own job. We, the critic, thrive on negative criticism, which is fun to write and to read, but the bitter truth we critics must face is that in the grand scheme of things, the average piece of junk is probably more meaningful than our criticism designating it so. But yet, with all this negativity and the parasitical relationship, the critic remains. They are given voice and power by those that listen to them. I think there are two reasons for this. The obvious is that it can tell a consumer what is or isn't worth their time, allowing the consumer who has a busy life and doesn't just watch media all day sort through the oncoming stream. The second reason is more subtle, but I believe that sometimes people need to fully understand their emotional reaction to something, and watching someone else describe and break it down gives them the insight into the work of art that they need. When reviewing the subject of critics, I ran across a discussion between Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. I probably butchered both their names. In regards to young critics. The primary advice that Roger Ebert gave was twofold. He suggested the new critic remember that critical review is not a science. It isn't objective but subjective, and that all critical reviews should be written from a personal experience. But he also warned to be honest with your experience, not to dumb it down or diffuse it. It was your experience, and to let that be genuine. I thought about the purpose of throwing my often not popular opinions into the ring of public discourse. I think as I do so, I will attempt to follow Mr. Ebert's advice as well as I can. Be honest, poignant, perhaps a tad brutal at times, but understanding particularly that this is my view and opinion, with no right to destroy or demolish the work or another's experience with it. Beyond that, I hope to entertain a little, and to give an environment for constructive discourse, which sometimes can be more enjoyable than any work of art actually is. The only other thing I wish to accomplish as I delve into some of these stories, I think, are best summarized by C.S. Lewis. This quote was directed in regards to authorship and storytelling, but I think it can be made appropriate to my own critical reviews that I plan to make in the future. I do not sit down at my desk to put into verse something that is already clear in my mind. If it were clear in my mind, I should have no incentive or need to write about it. We do not write in order to be understood. We write in order to understand. What is this, like a animal cruelty PSA, this music? Ugh, I didn't realize it was going to be so melodramatic.